This is Ed Rep Radio, presented by Eastman Music Company. This is Ed Rep Radio, a podcast to bring you ideas and information from industry experts you can use on the road every day. Presented by Eastman Music Company, and I'm your host, Shane Duell. Today's topic is centered around Ed Rep's role in having a positive impact on what is arguably the most important aspect of the health of the art of music making, school music education programs, the financial health of your company, the music industry as a whole, and arguably the mental, social, and emotional health of so many in our society. We're talking about having large numbers of beginning band and orchestra students start their musical journey every year in their local school music programs. Everything that I just mentioned would cease to exist if band and orchestra teachers didn't do a great job recruiting a new batch of beginners every single year. And your involvement can make a huge impact on successful recruiting. With us today are three expert recruiters with decades of experience in this topic. Michelle Mills from Eckroth Music, Paul Ramsaier from Quinlan and Fabish, and Amy D. from Ted Brown Music. They will give us a great overview on this incredibly important topic of recruiting, and I'm sure this episode is the first of several on successful beginning band and orchestra recruiting. Paul, Amy D., Michelle, thank you so much for joining me today. This is a really important topic for everyone to hear about and learn about, and recruiting is something that I find across the country. It's interesting. Some people are super involved with getting there in schools with their teachers, and they almost run the show, all the way down to ed reps who've never recruited ever, and everything in between. And the three of you have been recommended to me as being great recruiters. And so I'm so happy that you're here and willing to share what you do about recruiting. And before we launch into the topic, I wanted to get to know each one of you and have everyone learn about who you are, where you're at, the kind of market you serve, that kind of thing. And Amy D., let's start with you.
Well, hi. Welcome, everybody. I'm Amy D. I'm with Ted Brown Music, based out of Tacoma, Washington. My father was a band director in Bellevue, Washington. I grew up in the band world. He began a Birch Bay band workshop for a reading clinic for teachers, where I met a bunch of teachers there. I went to WSU and I graduated in elementary education. I taught for a couple years there. Got married and moved down to Oregon, had kids, and started my own business out of my home. And I was running around the state of Oregon and doing business down there with other customers. Once my kids flew the coop, I had gone up to Birch Bay and met a couple of ed reps from Tacoma from Ted Brown Music, and I thought, man, that's such a great thing. I think I'm gonna do that, or I really want to do that. And once my kids flew the coop, I got a job 6 weeks later with Ted Brown Music, and off to the races.
Okay, fantastic. Ted Brown Music, such a great store up there in the Pacific Northwest. All right, Paul, how about yourself?
Hi, thanks so much for having me. My name is Paul Ramsaier. I'm with Quinlan and Fabish Music Company. We're based out of Illinois, Indiana, and Michigan. I'm personally based in the Chicagoland suburbs. I grew up here, went to school downstate, and then in Louisiana, then in Texas. Gotten involved with the industry when I was living in Texas, working on my doctorate. And then kind of Texas logic, they sent me to a store location in St. Louis, thinking I would know everybody there from when I grew up in Chicago. And then just one thing led to another. I grew up with Quinlan and Fabish, so they had an opportunity, and I was looking for an opportunity, and I've been with them for going on 24 years now. And I just really love the recruiting aspect of our job. It's kind of the heart and soul of what we do.
Fantastic. All right, another great store. And Michelle, how about yourself?
Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me, Shane. I am with Eckroth Music, and we have 9 stores across Montana, Minnesota, North Dakota, and Wisconsin. And I am located in Minnesota, kind of central Minnesota, in St. Cloud, Minnesota. I have been road repping or school service for about 32 years. It came about, I went to college for music education. And after I got done with my student teaching, my husband had just started going to school for aquaculture. and there wasn't any student teaching jobs, or I mean, teacher jobs. Um, at the end of December when I had finished my student teaching. So I had found a position at a music store and found that I really loved working at the music store. Being able to use my skills and talents that I learned in college and then learning the business aspect has been really fun. And I started working in the store, and a couple of years later started calling on schools, and that's really where I found my love, is servicing the schools.
Okay, fantastic. So we're talking about recruiting beginning band and orchestra kids. And I'd like to just start with a big picture of why is it so important to have big, healthy beginning band and orchestra numbers in your school programs that you service. Michelle, we'll stick with you. Why is that important?
I think having healthy beginning band and orchestra numbers are really important for a couple of things, but kind of the big picture is music makes us all smarter, and just impacting the majority of the student population that we can to make a student a more well-rounded, balanced student, I think is really, really important. And having band and orchestra be a part of that and showing that you're working together and producing music just gives a more well-rounded student.
Hmm. So the more musicians there are out there in the world, the better the place the world is.
Yes.
I love it.
Music makes us all better, right?
Sure does. Yeah. Paul, what do you say?
Yeah, all the key points Michelle just mentioned are so important, but I've also always thought there's a strength in numbers aspect when it comes to music programs within the school, and a larger number is going to display to younger generations, younger years in the school, that this is part of the learning process. You know, they see the fifth graders or the sixth graders getting their instruments, going to their lessons, being in concerts, being friends with one another. It's a neat activity that if they're not familiar with, it draws their attention. And if you kind of set the norm that when you get to that grade where band and orchestra starts, that is just part of what you do. And then you can project all the important stuff we were just talking about sharing music education and all the benefits that come with it.
Yeah. Yeah. Great. Amy D, what do you think?
Oh man, it's hard to follow you two.
Yeah, it's tough
My
going last.
the first thing I thought about was attrition. The more beginners
Hmm.
that we have, the bigger the bands are going to be in the high school, and we just want to continue
Right.
to keep that program growing and growing to create all these special things that are the result of that. One of the things that I have is I service small schools. And one of the
Hmm.
benefits of being in band and orchestra in small schools is that you have a greater possibility of graduation because you are involved with something and you're not home going, being bored or getting into trouble. Band and
So true.
orchestra create something to do for a lot of these kids that need something to do because mom and dad are busy. So I truly believe that it helps create the whole child educationally, socially.
Yeah. Yeah. It really does make the world a better place, like we were saying a moment ago. Yeah, I love that. So how does having a healthy beginning band and orchestra program help the teacher? Michelle?
Well, it definitely can impact the kind of repertoire that you can have your students play,
Hmm.
and the experiences that you're able to give that student. And I'm talking about large group experiences, solo and ensemble experiences, just the kind of groups that you can put together. So the healthier the numbers, the better music that you're going to be able to play and have the students experience that they might not get to experience if there's only just a few in band or
Hmm.
orchestra.
Hmm. It's a more musically fulfilling experience for everybody if you have a
Mm-hmm.
full instrumentation. Yeah, I could see that.
Definitely.
Yeah. Amy D?
Well, that brings up a very good point. Festivals. A lot of the small schools, they don't get an opportunity to go to festivals because they don't have any kind of budget to get there. One of my first experiences with a festival was when a band, quote, quote, band came, and there were 9 kids in it.
Wow.
Um, they played chamber music. Everybody was one on a part. So, it created a lot of, they were nervous, but at the same time, it was I'm going to, I'm going to be a leader for my section. type of thing. And what they did from that experience is they went back to their school and they said, man, that was fantastic. I got to see bigger bands. I'm going to tell the younger students about this, and we're going to grow this band. And the next year they came and there was 15.
Yeah. Okay. I like that. Paul, what do you say?
Well, including all that, and while I appreciate the musical rewarding aspects, everything mentioned, there are some logistical things. You need to make sure you're filling up the room that you've been assigned in your building. You need to make sure not just the students are seeing what you're doing, but that your administration, your fellow teachers, everything like that. And, you need to make sure you have a solid core of students in place to cover all the aspects of what you want your program to do.
Yeah. Yeah. All true. I'd like to ask also, if a beginning band or orchestra isn't big enough, do you ever see teachers struggle keeping a full-time job? Do they ever see programs struggling to stay part of the school day, or having a full-time teacher? I'm seeing some heads nodding. Michelle, have you seen that?
Oh, yeah, definitely. The number of students that are involved in the program, are definitely going to affect the FTE that the district is looking at and the money that's allocated to that music department. So you can have a really small school, but if you have 80 to 90% of the class in band and or orchestra, you're going to be full time. If you don't have that kind of number participation, then yes, you will be doing other things in the district, or you just won't be full time.
Yeah. Yeah. Paul, have you seen that?
Yeah, how quickly we forget the early 90s, mid 90s, where programs were being cut left and right. It was unfortunately a downward trend for many years. And, more and more people were entering music education as a college major, and there were less and less opportunities for them when they got out. We persevered through COVID, I think, quite well when it's all said and done. But, how quickly we could be back to a point where administrators think we need to make cuts. Let's look at the music program. So, but if so many kids are involved, they're going to have to look elsewhere.
That's true. I can't remember who it was I heard say this, but there are very few problems in a music program that numbers can't solve. And it seems to be true. I think we've all seen programs that really struggled if the numbers are too small, and sometimes they go away. But then you have these armies of students, which come with armies of supportive parents, and they get real upset if the school wants to try to cut their big music program. I'd like to move on to, why do ed reps need to get involved? Can't teachers just do this all themselves? Why is it important for you in your role to get in there and do this with them? What do you think, Michelle?
Well, especially at schools, if the students are well aware of who the music teacher is, who the band or orchestra teacher is, sometimes bringing an outside person or an outside connection, they become the important person or the expert in that field. And it also can be a level of excitement when you bring somebody from the outside in. So I do think that having somebody come from the outside, they're able to help you balance your band. A lot of teachers don't always know the ins and outs of recruiting, and just getting somebody who does it full time, they're able to get the job done in a shorter amount of time and have a more well balanced experience.
Yeah, good. What do you think, Paul?
We always defer to our directors as the expert in all aspects of their program, but we also work to share, a great director will recruit 25 or 30 times in their career. And a lot of our reps will recruit 25 or 30 times in September alone. And so over the course of the year, we will have recruited 100 times or more, which, laps the director a couple of times. And it in no way means we're better at it or we know the program better, but we can bring options, other ways of doing things. And then, I think a lot of teachers will be the first to tell you, I covered and learned a lot of things about score study and conducting in college, but I never learned how to get a kid to make a sound on a flute. And it's like, how did you miss that? Or I am the band and orchestra and choir director at this school, and I play the viola. I don't know how I'm going to recruit a tuba player. So having an outside person can really just take the edge off of the unknown and hopefully bring a little support.
Yeah. Yeah. So you become the trusted advisor, really, and the expert in this topic of recruiting because you've done it so much. Do you have like a before and after story where there's a teacher who struggled recruiting and then you started to help this teacher and had some sort of a different outcome? Paul?
I'm going to try not to talk about COVID too much, but during the peak of COVID times when we had programs shut down just simply because they couldn't recruit or play instruments for whatever the mitigation reasons were for that, it moved recruiting to the next level. So I had a lot of schools where they recruit in the last year of elementary school, but they missed that class because of COVID. So out of the blue, the middle school teacher had to recruit for the first time in their 25, 30-year career. And this was very telling. And they had a great appreciation for what the elementary teachers did, but the elementary teachers weren't available. They had their now new group of kids that they were focused on recruiting. So out of the blue, they would start reaching out to us, their ed reps, saying, how do they do it? Where do they do it? What do I need? And we just had to start from scratch. And fortunately, just what we had in place, they just didn't even know. They're like, wait, you can help them get the instrument too? It's like, yes, absolutely. And the books and the supplies. And so it's kind of a broad success story, but it was great to see after all our years of doing this at the one level, the next level then saw everything that we do, and then in turn saw everything that their feeder directors do, which was kind of a double win in a lot of ways.
Yeah. All right. Awesome. Michelle, do you have a before and after story?
Yeah, we had a school that they used to do all of their own recruiting and they didn't have very high numbers. And they talked to us and said, what can we do to increase our numbers in our program? And at this time that they were talking to us, there was talk in the administration that they might have to cut part of their program or their FTEs so that they wouldn't be full time. And so the director was kind of scrambling. And so we asked them if they would let us come in and help them do the recruiting to see if it could make a difference for them. And it really did. We've developed a good station testing where you can test all of the students and not just the few that want to be in music. You get those students that are kind of on the fence post. They're not sure that they can do it, so they don't take music. And it made such a huge difference. I think her program almost doubled overnight.
Wow.
And she was able to keep her job full time. And ever since then, her program has been flourishing.
Fantastic.
So, yeah.
Yeah. I'd love to hear that. So do you ever have a hard time getting teachers to see the value of you being involved? Or do teachers tend to want to just kind of do their thing and they don't need your help? I got this kind of thing. Or do you have a hard time selling them on the idea? Paul?
Sometimes, especially young teachers, they see us as salespeople, and there's a whole nother session that could be had on how to break down that wall. And so it's important that they realize that we do this for a living and we can bring some assistance, that we are musicians ourselves. I play the tuba, and so many of my directors are like, that's the one instrument I could never really play. And so if that alone gets me in for just a little while to do the demonstration or help a kid get their first sound, that goes a long way. And, I often talk about, we try to self-promote through social media and things like that. I just let people know, hey, today we're doing the beginning band recruiting at so-and-so school, or having a great night meeting all the new orchestra students at this other school. And they quickly see that you're doing this everywhere. And the key thing is when they see you're helping another director or a program that they greatly respect, or maybe they grew up in, or they student taught at, and then they're like, oh, well, if so-and-so uses them or works with him or her for that, maybe I should at least look into it. So it's a little bit about selling yourself, and then all the other stuff we've talked about, you can kind of start working into the process. And I think they'll see the results in short time.
Yeah. Okay. Michelle?
I'm going to echo what Paul said. What I usually like to talk with teachers about is programs that we have done recruiting in and how successful they are, and to show the balance. I think a lot of teachers have a hard time when they're doing recruiting, keeping their band balanced or their orchestra balanced, and how successful it is in a shorter amount of time. So that keeps them as an educator with more student contact time with their existing students and not taking them out of the classroom as much, so that kids that are in music in their classroom right now are getting more teacher time, and they're very little time outside the classroom, and we're still getting the same job done and creating that excitement as being the outside expert coming in to help them.
Yeah, good. Amy D., you ever get resistance from teachers when you offer to help them recruit?
I've had that experience. I think it was once, but that educator left. So quite honestly, I don't have a very good experience with that. Most of my small schools are grateful to have me come in.
Yeah, probably welcome any bit of help they can get, right, from those, especially smaller schools.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes. And can you play drums on this part for me while you're here?
Right. Okay. So speaking of time, I'm just curious, amongst the three of you, how much time do you spend out of your year, I guess you could say? How much time do you spend recruiting, Paul?
This is a well-timed question. For many years, decades, all recruiting occurred between Labor Day and Columbus Day. It was 99% of beginning band and orchestra students start during those first few weeks of school. Then we had a novelty. Spring recruiting started becoming a thing where either they needed to turn in schedules or they needed to get their staffing. Administrators wanted to know numbers for the upcoming year. So then spring started becoming a really busy time as well. So we did like 80% in the fall and 20% in the spring, and that kept going and going. And then not to belabor this, but a few years ago, actually about 10 years ago now, several of our schools moved from an elementary school start to a middle school start, which, without getting into a whole bunch of the politics, the end result was they had to turn in the kids' schedules in January or February of fifth grade so they could start in the right class in sixth grade. So then all of a sudden, 2 or 3 of the largest districts we work with started winter recruiting. And that really felt a little odd at the time because they were signing up for band and orchestra in January that they were going to start in September.
Right.
But it really caught on. A lot of programs moved that way. And then this past year, because of a scheduling snafu, we had one of those January schools do their event in December. So we have officially recruited 12 months a year for the last couple of years. And I don't see that changing. There's been a big diversity as to when the program needs to start, kind of based on their needs.
Interesting. Yeah. That 9 months ahead of when they actually play their first note, they need to be recruited. Wow. Michelle?
It's been a similar situation in our area as well. We have 2 seasons. We have a spring and a fall. It used to be that the fall was much heavier. I would say the spring business is a lot heavier when it comes to recruiting and parent meetings. And you are totally right, especially in the larger districts when it comes to the students have to be registered for a class. They have to figure out their schedules. And some of those schools are starting that registration in December and in January. And so you want to make sure that you're hitting the recruiting right before registration happens. So it's fresh in their mind. Oh, yes, I got to get registered for band because I thought that was a cool class. So you have to start your recruiting sometimes so much earlier than what is most ideal for the teacher and for the music store.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I would say we're very, very similar to Paul in that we recruit almost year round. There's just very little downtime where you're not recruiting, actively going out and doing recruiting in the schools with the teachers.
Okay. Yeah. Amy D, same thing there?
Yes, but I'm also recruiting the general music teacher.
Interesting. How so?
Well, if I can talk to the general music teacher to maybe doing a segment on band and orchestra instruments and introducing them one at a time to the kids, it's one step ahead of me so that I have time to plan. The kids have time to get excited about coming to the recruiting where they can actually play the instrument, not just watch a video. And it's just kind of ramps it up for me. The other thing is that we started doing the spring testing. You are right, Michelle. With all the things that are going on in schools now and all the testings, recruiting is just pushing up and up and up to the point where we start on the first day of school recruiting the next generation of band and orchestra students.
Yeah, always recruiting. Yeah, I like that. I guess my question was going to be, what's the best time of year to recruit? And it sounds like it's all 100% based around when the teacher needs you to recruit, when the kids register for school, whether it's elementary school versus middle school. It sounds like it's all totally based on those things. What happens to kind of get ready for this? Let's say the middle school situation, the students need to register, let's say February 1st is when they register for the next year. They're fifth graders, they're going to register for middle school. When do you actually go out and get in front of the students? Michelle?
If they're going to register that first week of February, I would say 30 days out, you need to actually start being in the schools. And I would encourage the director to have some sort of concert of some kind that the students can listen to, that are students that they know, that are maybe leaders in that school, perform, and maybe give a little stand up as to why they joined band and why they selected that instrument. Also, with the general music class, showing the different instruments just as an instrument, the different instruments in the band and the orchestra. And then coming in and actually having the hands on where you're going to try them on the mouthpiece or try them on the instrument or have them hold the instrument. I think those are kind of the steps that I follow when we're doing recruiting, but you for sure have to start at least 30 days out from the day that they're actually going to register. And as close as you can do the hands-on to the registration, the better, because you want to create that excitement right before they're going to actually register. That is the most impactful.
Okay. Yeah, good. What do you say, Amy D?
Well, to tack on to that, which was beautifully said, Michelle, I also like to send a lot of information home. And so we start with maybe a letter from the educator from either the band or orchestra programs. Sometimes it's both. And then start with emails because parents are busy. Sometimes the paperwork doesn't get home. It doesn't survive lunch.
Right.
So it's important to send those things electronically and physically. We also have done it through the mail, through the postal service, to send the information home to the folks to get them excited about it as well. And then they get to start talking about it with the kids. We also have a certification that we pass out to the kids as they are testing and trying the instruments. They get to circle the picture of the instrument they try and star the one they like the best. And then they take it home and show mom and dad, look what I accomplished. And that excites them in order to register for band and orchestra program.
Okay, fantastic. So I'm curious about the actual format of what you do. When you get out there, let's say you have the time set up with the teacher, you're going into the classroom of the future beginners. So what does it look like when you walk into that classroom, and what kind of format do you follow? Michelle?
When we come in, I usually bring a group with me, and it's usually I call it station testing. We came up with this, I don't remember how many years ago, but we've been using it ever since. And I come with a group of teachers that are probably retired teachers that will help us out with what I call play testing. And depending on the school situation, we may just use mouthpieces, or we may use the mouthpiece with the instrument. And what I have found to be really successful is that if you have one person doing the flute, then all of the students that you're testing, the accuracy or consistency, I should say, from one student to the other in the grading policy, or how you rate them, is going to be a lot more consistent versus if everyone had their own set of instruments, because everybody's got a different perspective on things. So selecting the right people to try the students with the right instruments and then collecting all of that information at the end is very time efficient and also very consistent, so you get an overall balanced band.
Okay. So it sounds like you're, some people call it petting zoos, some people call it various things, but you're bringing instruments into the class. The students are trying them there. And you're bringing in teachers. That's interesting. Like you have a whole army of recruiters there with you. Could you talk a little bit more about how you find these teachers, who they are? Do you pay them? I mean, what does that look like?
Well, they're teachers of schools that I've called on that have retired over the years. So they are friends that we've made. As you call on schools, you become friends with your teachers. And as they retire, you just give them a call and ask them if they are interested. And most retired teachers are really interested because they kind of miss that student interaction and they love helping students. So they're usually really, really excited and enjoy coming in and doing that kind of work.
Yeah, they're probably super experienced too. If they're retired teachers, they know how to have a kid make a sound on a flute. Yeah, very smart. I like that. Paul, what does your recruiting look like?
Similar to as Michelle mentioned, we'll bring we'll bring a crew into the classroom, and different formats kind of based on what the director would like us to do, or we can work out a program in advance. We also bring in former and current music educators, and we all have that friend who says, I love other people's children, but I don't want any of my own. We have a lot of retired directors. They're like, oh, I love recruiting now with these other kids. So they're all into it and they just love participating. And then of course they already know what they're doing. So it goes a long way. But yeah, we can go into the classroom or into the gymnasium and the classrooms come down. We have some events where it will be an after-school setting and they'll have appointments with their parents there and they'll come up to the table. They'll try their 2 or 3 instruments. We have different procedures that we can recommend. We have one, recruiting by the numbers, in which, it really helps to balance out the instrumentation because they're going to try one select instrument from each table. And that makes sure you don't have the overflow of saxophone and percussion or everybody choosing the cello or something like that. It helps kind of balance all that out. So we meet with the directors in advance, especially when they're new to us. We kind of get a game plan in place, not too soon, not too close, so you can get everything in, but keep that sense of urgency going too the whole time. And then we just find the right fit for each school. We review after the event and make sure it was a good fit. And if not, we make plans for the following year to do something a little different.
Okay. Very good. Amy D., what does your recruiting look like?
So we like to encourage our educators to actually come out and recruit with us. It provides a face that the kids can recognize in the following year. Assuming they're going from an elementary school to a middle school, that's the one face they're going to recognize going into a strange school. Is that educator that shows up and helps with the testing. We use other ed reps to come out with us. So they're pulled off the road and they go to the schools with us. That way we are assured that the student is going to get the best possible testing that we can offer. If you think about it, the educator goes out and tests once a year, right? Ed reps go out and test 30 times a year. So we have 30 times the experience of the educator in testing students.
Right.
That's why we do it that way.
Yeah. You brought up something interesting. Do you ever go out solo? Do teachers ever say, why don't you just go do the recruiting for me? Do you ever do it without the teacher?
Yes, absolutely. We have some educators that can't find substitutes.
Substitutes. Yeah, there's a shortage, isn't there?
Yes, there is. Almost every small school that I go to, there's a big sign outside saying now hiring.
Wow.
And if you think about it, it's hard for a substitute who has taught English to go into a band or an orchestra room and substitute there.
Yeah, it's entirely different. Huh. And the teachers are okay with you just basically going out and doing the work for them, for their program. They must trust you.
Well, like I said, well, sure, of course. I think all of us ed reps have built a trust factor with the educators that they work with. And they know your experience. And again, I do this 30 times a year, whereas they do it once. So also getting to know the general music teachers is also very helpful. Sometimes we'll do it during music class and they will be present as well.
Okay.
So they get an opportunity to see me work. Then they pass that along to the music band or orchestra educator. And the trust is then built in.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's got to be done, right? The recruiting has to be done. Otherwise there won't be a band and orchestra. So it's amazing that you go out and do that work for them, but I'm sure it benefits you and your business as well, right? Since, beginners are where all the rentals come from. It makes a lot of sense to go do that. Very cool to hear
Absolutely.
your teachers trust you enough to put such an important task out of their hands and into yours. Interesting. So I'm curious, what do you bring? What physical materials are required to go out there and do the instrument testing or the mouthpiece testing? Paul, what do you bring out there into the classroom?
We bring pretty much everything. We're going to bring the instruments themselves, enough to have one for every one or two testers, especially flute, trumpet, clarinet, violin, things that many students are going to try. Of course, mouthpieces, ligatures, reeds, the basics like that. And of course, these days, Santa Mist, cleaning spray, lots and lots and lots of cleaning spray. And then it's often that the director is really just going to bring their handout or their flyer that they're going to give the student, or their little which 3 instruments are you going to try type of thing. But as far as general materials, we bring pretty much everything instrument and supply wise.
Okay. Well, you have all the resources, right? Back at the store. You have all those things you just described.
Unlimited everything, you bet.
Yeah. Well, I imagine you're not bringing your shiniest, nicest, newest, most expensive models. Do you have any guidance on, I guess, what you select to bring out there?
Yeah, a technical answer is we have select instruments that are to be used for recruiting or as loaner instruments. So your first stop should be grabbing from those. But you do occasionally get a director or, they're like, I want an attractive looking euphonium, because that's an instrument that a lot of students aren't familiar with. So if you have a shiny, happy one, that might grab some attention and more students will try it. And that can be worked out if needed, no problem. But, it's about learning to recruit. It's not about the shininess of the instrument. It's about falling in love with the sound, the feel, finding that tune that they've always wanted to play, and how quickly, the shininess kind of fades into the background.
Okay. It's all about the sound and the feel and just physically trying it. Okay. Amy D, what do you think? What do you bring out there?
Oh, whatever the educator wants. But, riding along with what Paul said, it's hard to find an ugly string instrument. They're all so pretty. So we tend to bring the used stock for our rental stock out there. So there's not too many chips or dents. The kids get used to that. When I do sectionals, like with station testing, I'll bring 1 flute and 3 extra head joints.
Okay.
That helps condense what I have to pack in. With the brass, I'll bring 1 trombone and 3 extra mouthpieces.
I
things
see.
like that.
Okay.
I'm just changing the head joints. That way I'm not going to my vehicle 17 times to unpack my items.
I see.
You can generally bring it in with the ed reps and one bag.
Okay. Got it. Michelle?
I'm very similar to what Amy does. We have really one set of instruments. I bring one flute. I probably will bring two clarinets and one saxophone, one trumpet, one trombone, a euphonium. But then we bring along, we had a person that took a 3D printer and had an engineering degree and created us head joints on the flute that will fit into our flute. And so I have extra head joints, that way you can submerge the whole head joint into the cleaning solution and you don't have to necessarily use the spray, but you can actually submerge the whole thing. And then we bring extra clarinet mouthpieces, saxophone mouthpieces, trumpet and trombone mouthpieces, so that kids can actually be practicing on them before it's their turn to try. We bring the scorecards for the teacher. I usually bring a flyer that is sent home with the families after we're done recruiting. They get the teacher letter with the recommendations of what the student is going to play, along with a copy of their scorecard, along with a copy of the flyer that promotes them renting an instrument. We bring along all of the solutions and the paper towels, and I even bring staplers, pens, you name it. If you're using it in any shape or form, Eckroth Music brings it along when we do our recruiting session, because sometimes you just don't know if everything's always going to work at the school, and you always want to be prepared.
Yeah. Sounds like you're very prepared. You have everything. You make it easy for the teacher, don't you?
Yes.
Yeah. Huh. So when you're out there with the schools, I'm curious what your role is versus the teacher's role. Do you let the teachers really take the lead? Do you tend to take the lead? I'm kind of curious what it looks like. Paul?
Of course, we'll defer to the director and let them participate or do any part that they feel the most comfortable with. But a lot of our directors, they kind of do the meet and greet aspect of things. As the students come down to the room, they'll talk to the student, they'll give them the timeline. Here's what's going to happen today. You'll try these 2 or 3 instruments. Then the students will come in, see us, we'll help them with the instrument testing or fitting, and then they see the director on the way out. And so we have, like I said, they're kind of the first and last stop with several of our tables in between. And we have a lot of directors that they trust us to do the actual testing part. They're comfortable enough with that they'll just handle the, I don't want to say administrative as in administrator, but they'll handle the clerical and the meet and greet aspect of things.
Okay. Kind of the relationship side of things. You're
Correct.
trying to get to know the kids. Yeah. Okay. Michelle?
We're very similar. I really prefer that the director talks to the students, because sometimes that's the first time they've met these students. And I think it's really important for them to see that they are the band or orchestra director. And most times they will defer on how the day is going to run by having Eckroth stand up and give directions to the students, like how it's going to work by rotating around to the different stations. But then during the time that the recruiting is happening, the director then gets to interact with the students on a more personal level. And find out like what excites them. Hey, did I have your older sibling in band or orchestra? And then at the very end, being the checkout person. So when the student is done trying out the different instruments, that little exit interview that the teacher's doing to connect with that student, like, what excited you about this? Are you interested in band? Yes, no, or maybe? And what instrument did you find worked the best for you? And just having that little interview at the end. So I think it's important that the teacher starts it, that they interact with students during the time that the recruiting is happening, and the exit interview. That is the most ideal situation.
Okay. Great. What do you think, Amy D?
It's very similar, very similar. One of the fun things that I like to do is if I happen to have a school with more than one elementary, I like to pit them against the other elementary school. I'll say, okay, well, this school did this many and they're going to register, so let's try and beat them. And that's kind of a fun addition to that. But for the most part, it is the meet and greet and have the educator going around and talking to each individual student if possible, and then the final kind of pep rally at the very end before they go back to their class.
Okay. Yeah, interesting. Very good. Does it look different when you do, and do you do, orchestra recruiting versus band? Everything we've been talking about, with only a couple mentions is of strings, has been really very band focused. Do you recruit for your orchestras as well as you do for your bands? Amy D?
Oh, yes, absolutely. I only have 2 schools that do orchestra as well. But the benefit of having orchestra available for both band and orchestra recruiting days is that it's an instantaneous sound that they can make on a string. It's not something that they really have to buzz their lips or make a certain motion with their lips. It's instantaneous gratification.
Yeah, good point. No skilled embouchure.
Nope, not at all. And some of the kids just need that, or maybe they like the quieter sound. Some of the kids just say, "Okay, I think this is for me." So that's how I work that in.
It's always interesting, isn't it? Like what draws a kid to an instrument it's some interesting psychological experiment I'd love to have somebody do and read a whole report on. Michelle, do you do orchestra recruiting?
We do orchestra recruiting. I think of orchestra recruiting more, for band, you're looking at like facial features to find out what's best going to fit that student and how they're going to be most successful. For orchestra, obviously there is a size for everybody out there. So it's more about what kind of pitches do you like? Do you like high pitches? Do you like low pitches? Do you like to stand? For the string bass, do you like to sit in a chair? Do you like to hold your arm out? Like a lot of things go into play when you're doing orchestra, and really getting them to actually experience the orchestra instrument, I think, is probably the best. And then really finding out, do they like the highs? Do they like the lows? So that's how we go about doing orchestra recruiting. It's really hands-on and figuring out what they like and what they don't like.
Okay. Yeah. Paul?
Yeah, we do a considerable amount of string recruiting, and everything in particular, like Michelle said, it's about connecting to the instrument, since there is a size that's going to work for them. But in addition to the sound of the instrument, it's kind of what role they play in the ensemble. If you want to be a solid bass, firm, playing that rhythm again and again, bass is probably going to be a great instrument for you. Do you want to have a more gentle kind of accompaniment, supportive role? Let's check out the viola and everything like that. So it's combining that and making sure you project as much energy and excitement about the string instruments across the board. So you don't just have a whole classroom of violin. I don't know about Michelle or Amy, but we also have a lot of string programs. They only start violin and cello. And so it's going to be one or the other. And I don't know if you see that as often, but it seems to be a trend.
We don't have anybody in our area that does anything like that. For band, we have where they don't start any percussionists and switch to percussion later. Or sometimes they don't start saxophone players and they select those from our clarinet section. But for the most part, in all of our string programs, we start all 4: violin, viola, cello, and bass.
Yeah, interesting how it varies around the country, depending on the teachers and who taught the teachers and all that. Yeah. So we've talked about the instrument trying, the petting zoos. It sounds like it's pretty much what the 3 of you do, bring instruments out. Does anybody demonstrate the instruments for the students? Do you need to be proficient on playing an instrument for the students before they try it? Paul?
Yeah, without a question. A lot of our ed reps have a music education background. So whether it was through a method class in college or just simple trial and error, they're able to do a strong enough performance in a demonstration setting to get through all the instruments. And we also, whether it be in our rep meetings or in our rep camp from year to year, we do, I don't want to say a master class, but we get all the instruments out, especially with the strings, because a lot of us are have a band background. We do, we jokingly call it the Quinlan and Fabish beginning orchestra. And it's all the reps and our string specialists have us all sitting there on instruments. We record it and they do a session. We learn the 4 strings. They teach us a very basic song. We record it, and we've had our first lesson on whatever your string instrument of choice was that day. And directors get a kick out of that as well, seeing their tuba playing rep, playing the viola. But it also brings some legitimacy that we can help in a recruiting setting on any instrument.
Wow, that's fantastic. You actually practice.
Yeah.
I love it. I love it. What about you, Amy?
I like that very much, Paul. That's great. We usually try and bring someone who's very proficient on brass and someone who's very proficient on woodwinds and someone who's very proficient on strings. Sometimes we just don't have that capability. We just do our best. One of the things I try and explain to the kids is we're going to make some noises today. Are they going to be the best noises that we hear? Probably not, but we're going to make some noises. And this is what these sound like. And again, we go through it. Do you like the high pitches? Do you like the low pitches? And then we have them try them out. Listening to me on a trombone, no, you don't want to do that. Can I make a noise on a trombone? You bet. And can I get someone else excited about playing trombone? Absolutely. Because there's a slide on a trombone. If I just try and make it fun for each individual instrument. And like I said, we try and find some ed reps that are proficient in all those different instruments to bring with us, so that we can complete that goal for the educator.
Excellent, makes sense. Michelle, what do you say?
We do demonstrate the instruments. I guess every situation is slightly different. It will depend upon the amount of time that we're given to do recruiting. So if we have a larger class and the goal that the teacher wants is for all of the students to try all of the instruments and not just a few, we will do a quick demonstration on all of the instruments so that they know what they sound like, and then have them go around and try out all of the different instruments. Now, if we're short on time, we would have planned for that in advance, and then they would have gotten to hear all of those instruments prior to coming. But we might do a small introduction, when we're kind of introducing the stations, like this is how you're going to produce a sound when you go to each station as a full group. So it gives them an idea, if they don't get to every station, which ones they want to go to right away. And then for orchestra, yes, we do a little demonstration on all of the different instruments, just so that they can hear the difference between the highs and the lows, because just talking about highs and lows, the students kind of need to feel, hear, see, that kind of thing. So yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Okay. Do you ever see where the demonstration of the instrument affects kids' preferences on what they want to play? I remember recruiting with a band director who was a really terrible flute player, gotta say. And he would play like, oh gosh, guys, I'm so sorry. This sounds so terrible. And nobody wanted to play the flute. He always had a hard time recruiting flute players because he just didn't demonstrate it well and profusely apologized for his chops. So do you ever see that happen? Does it matter, like the level of demonstration per instrument? Does a better performance inspire students and a bad performance turn them away from an instrument? What do you think, Paul?
Yeah, it's partially your performance or your demo. It's also partially what's popular right now. There was the Lisa Simpson playing the saxophone for many years. There was SpongeBob or Squidward playing the clarinet was popular for many years. Trombone has come and gone, so there's an aspect of that. And as I mentioned, I'm fortunate I play the tuba, so I have a lot of directors who are like, if you can play something cool, on the low brass instruments. That's going to really get their attention. You want them to have their choice of instrument, but if you can make sure they become familiar with euphonium or trombone and some of the cool aspects of those instruments, it's going to at least increase the odds that they'll consider that as their choice of instrument. So yeah, you need to give a solid performance or find somebody who can help you take it to the next level. But again, I think it's what you play as well can be a huge factor.
Something cool is more attractant, right? Yeah. What do you think, Amy D?
One of the things I also like to do when I've got recruiting going on is I ask the classroom teachers if they've ever played an instrument. And if the answer is yes, I usually try and get them to come and make noise on the instrument. And the kids get so excited about that. And it's just, wow, some adult that I know plays an instrument. That sounds like a fun thing to do.
Yeah, that's a nice touch. It's a nice touch, especially if like the principal plays an instrument. All right, what do you say, Michelle?
I do think that, yes, the performance that you have on your instrument or that you're demonstrating to the student is important. But I think one of the biggest things is also your personality. You need to be really fun and upbeat and very encouraging, because a lot of students come to you are very doubtful that they can't do this. Like, I'm not going to be able to make a sound. Like they've convinced themselves before they've even tried that they can't make a sound. And just your encouragement and being upbeat and just your personality will really shine through and get kids to be wanting to join band and orchestra.
So if it looks like you're having fun, it must be fun.
Exactly. If you make it really rudiment, like you need to stand here, you need to do this, like then it's going to sound like work. And it's not going to sound like something that they want to be a part of. But if you're making it more a fun experience and engaging with them and encouraging, and you just need to let your personality come through, and you can get a lot of kids to join band and orchestra just with that.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. A lot of sense. So it sounds like you spend a fair amount of time out there in the schools recruiting. I remember myself, it seemed like it took an enormous amount of hours and work to get out there. So the time itself, I'm curious, first of all, do your other teachers that you're not out there recruiting with, do they ever have a hard time with the fact that you're not out there on your route? Do they ever complain about that? How do you navigate that? Paul?
It is a tough situation sometimes a year. And, like anything, I try to communicate so clearly, here's what I'm doing today. And they know how important recruiting is, but I let them know, like I said, I promote in social media and they'll say, I think you had an event every night last week. It's like, yes, and every night this week. And so as long as they know what you're doing and they know you're out there trying to better the world of music education by starting new band and orchestra students, that usually can carry you a good ways. And quite simply, if you do a good job the rest of the year, you can buy yourself a little street cred and they'll be willing to work with you. And then there's some days it's just a really long day. You'll have to hit 3 or 4 schools before your 8 a.m. recruitment and then maybe get to a couple afterwards. Even if it's a quick drop off or pickup, at least they know you're getting the efforts and you can get really pressing things taken care of.
Yeah, makes sense. Michelle, how do you navigate that?
I would like to echo Paul on that. If I'm doing recruiting on a full day, I will try to find a way to reroute my schools from that day to another day. But yes, clearly setting the expectation, making sure that you're communicating really well with the teachers that you can't be there. And this is why. Most teachers are lenient in that, oh, yes, we want more band and orchestra kids. So they understand that you can't maybe always be there at Tuesday at 10 o'clock, but as long as they have needs and you're able to meet that with shipping them something or doing a drop-off pickup thing and making sure their needs are taken care of and you're communicating clearly, most of them don't have a problem with that.
Okay. Yeah. So we spend all this time out there recruiting, and it sounds like the route's not a huge deal to step away from for a little bit. How do you make it worth your time? Do you see an increased return on rentals or eventually step ups? I mean, how does it affect your business, and is it worth the time? Paul?
From day one with the director, we talk about the partnership aspect of the whole recruiting process. We really want to help you. And if you just make it so you're invaluable to them, they're going to make it so the parents know that you're invaluable, that you have been part of the process from start to finish, and that they should absolutely make sure they get the information from you or your company. And so that in itself. And then, of course, if you plant that seed with their beginning instrument, you are the default go-to for their next instrument or the step-up instrument, or more so their next student. It's like, oh, you're going to try these instruments on this day, and the following week we'll have a parent meeting. We'll go rent our instrument from Quinlan and Fabish or Eckroth or whoever their local company is that helped with the recruiting. So yeah, without question, I mean, you get in there and you become part of the overall process.
Okay. So it sounds like you have the conversation about the parent night, rentals, all that thing, along with doing the recruiting. Is that right?
Absolutely. It's, it's a 5, 6, 10-step process, depending how you break it down, with step one being getting the dates on the calendar, and the last step being the first day of band or orchestra, and us being involved with every step in between.
Yeah. Okay. Makes a lot of sense. Amy D?
For me, it's results of the results of the registration, and it's the results of the rentals that happen. So that's how I judge that.
Just by the return on the rental numbers, right?
Absolutely. That's what my store looks for.
Sure. Yeah. But in the same time, if there's more beginners, your teachers are happier. They have a more solid base to work off of. They have more job security, and you get more rentals. Michelle, what do you say?
Definitely, it's the partnership with the teacher. You need to, when you're recruiting, you have to have the teacher involved in having that partnership, in that teacher support. By the time you're done recruiting, they're going to thank you for all of the time saving that has helped them build their band from the bottom up. And by having their support and being in partner with them, you're not only helping them gain numbers, but then they are also reciprocating and helping you gain your rentals, because they're recommending their families to go to you to get their instruments and their products and their repairs and their services done. And so, it's kind of like we're helping each other and just really supporting each other. We each have a job to do. We're just doing it together to accomplish the same thing.
Yep, makes sense. After the recruiting is done, I'm curious if there's any sort of follow-up that you are involved with outside of some of the rental night stuff we did. I'm curious if there's some sort of a email you send, or do you send the teacher some sort of a package to send home with the students, and what happens between the recruiting and the sign up that you might be involved with? Do you do anything like that, Paul?
Most definitely. Some of it is in-house things. We will pass along videos, or this is how to unpackage your trumpet and oil the valves, or here's some benefits of the rental program, or here's just a great video of an ensemble or a person performing. So if you're not familiar with the oboe, might be able to learn a little bit more about it. And then, there's some stuff in the world at large, whether it be through NAM or NASMD, just providing all sorts of great resources that, again, we're super familiar with and we know how great they are, but maybe a parent or even a director isn't. So we try to share some of that to kind of keep the excitement going, whether it be right before they start playing, or more so, 6 or 8 weeks after they started playing, when they've gotten to that first kind of lull in the excitement. What are we doing now to help continue the development process? And that's where those kind of things really can come in helpful, kind of reignite the excitement a little bit after they've gotten over the first 6-8 weeks of really exciting times.
Good. Michelle?
So anything that is like handed out, we aren't able to send out emails because a lot of the schools that we deal with, you're not allowed to collect any of the information.
Yeah, there's
and
laws, right?
Yeah, exactly. So a lot of what happens for us is a lot of that information is put together before the recruiting, or it's at the recruiting, and then those things are handed out. But there's usually some sort of follow-up that is sent with that, like yes, I'm going to be in band or orchestra, no, I'm not going to be in band and orchestra, that kind of thing.
Okay.
But the other thing that we do is we will take the testing cards that we use and we'll compile all of it into a spreadsheet for the teacher for first and second choice, and then provide that for them. And then we usually give them updates when, because obviously the recruiting, especially in some of the larger schools, happens so early, and they might not have their parent meeting until really late. And then let's say you do your recruiting in January, they don't do their parent meeting until April, and they're really not going to start band until September. So there's such a long period of time that we're constantly giving them updates on where we're at with who has registered. And then there are nice reminders that are sent out, like we'll help our teachers compile reminders that will be sent out via social media and or through Schoology, or however they communicate to their parents on Susie's registered for band, make sure you have your instrument, or Johnny's registered for orchestra, please make sure you have your instrument, here's the supply list. So we help our teachers and give them prompts throughout the process to make sure that by the time band or orchestra starts, when it's that long of a time period, that everybody's got what they need when band and orchestra start. Because that's probably the most detrimental thing in doing recruiting so early, is that, oh, I'll get that later mentality, and then it never happens. And then all of a sudden the first day comes and it's like, oh my gosh, I need to go out and get this and that. And then they don't get what they need when they need it, you know?
Yeah. You're very involved, aren't you? It sounds like you really walk the teachers through every step all the way until those students are sitting in their chair with their instrument playing their first note.
Well, because one of the most frustrating things I know for teachers is having the first day of band or orchestra and students not having what they need, because then you have someone sitting there upset because they're not able to do the same thing that the other students are doing, and how we can minimize that and still keep that excitement going. Because we all know when you're first starting an instrument, it's a lot of work. And if they're frustrated right from day one, what are the chances that they're going to survive?
Yeah, interesting. I'm curious, Michelle, sticking with you for a second. Do you sit down with a calendar with your teachers? How do you keep this so organized?
We do. I actually have been having, I have road meetings with the team. And during these road meetings, we have already talked about recruiting calendar. And with the recruiting calendar, also the parent meeting and all of the things that go into proactively getting those things, because we deal with so many schools and we do so much recruiting. If we don't have it on the calendar far enough in advance, it's hard to find enough people to work those sessions, because some of those sessions are all day long and you need to have enough time to find the right people to help you with those.
Okay. Wow. That is very thorough.
Got to start early.
Yeah.
The early bird gets the worm.
Plan it out. Amy D?
So basically, one of the things we do an awful lot of what Michelle said we do. We just basically hold the hands of the classroom educator as well as the parent. We really want to involve the parent. So one of the things we have is a QR code, and for each school, not only just the district, but for each school. So we try and make it as parent friendly as possible, because some parents don't even know what a flute looks like.
Sure.
So what we do is we provide a QR code just for that classroom, and that classroom, they go on that QR code, and the only things that are available on that website is what the teacher recommends. There's no option for book failure.
Interesting. Okay. Where is this QR code?
We send the QR codes home on the back of the certificates. We send them with the parent letters. We give them to the educators to send. So it's just blasted out there, and it says parent friendly on it so that they know that they're not going to be struggling through this. It's a super easy process and with no fail. The only time they can fail is if they forget to press book. So yeah, that's how we follow up with that. We also do spring reservation. So once they go through the recruiting process, they can reserve their instrument for next fall at the financial rate that they can afford. And it's guaranteed. So it will show up before school starts, and they will have all the equipment that they need on the first day of school.
Interesting. So you recruit them, they sign up, they reserve an instrument, and then months later, when school actually starts, they're all set. Is that about right?
They walk in the door, their name is on their instrument with their reeds, with their book, with their care kit, with their stand, all in one big package, and they just go pick it up. It's super easy. Don't have to come to the store at all.
Yeah. Does the teacher like that system?
My educators really like that system. We, in small schools, some of the rural areas, they can't really afford some of the higher end rentals, so they can reserve the lower end ones and be secured of getting that.
Fantastic. That's really smart. Really smart. So last question for all of you. You've all been recruiting for years, and you have lots and lots of experience. And I'm curious, if you were to pick one lesson you wish you could go back and teach yourself early on to your first few years of recruiting, what would you go tell yourself? What lesson do you think is the most important that you'd learned? Paul?
It's a little cliche, but it always bears repeating. Communication is so key. And it's not just between you and the director. It's between you, the director, the administrator, the school secretary, the custodian, the classroom teachers, the general music teachers. There's a lot of people that need to be involved and know about this whole procession because they all help each other with everything. And this is part of you joining their school and partnering with the program. And if they're familiar with it, and they can make or break the whole process real easily. So make them your friends, make sure they know what's going on. Nobody likes to be caught by surprise, and any one of them can derail or help you succeed in the process. So make sure everybody knows the dates, how it works, what the options are, everything like that. And I think you'll see a lot of great results with that in the long run.
Yeah. Great advice. Great advice. What do you think, Amy D?
Well, along with what Paul just said, the bus schedule is important. Making sure that making sure your testing doesn't fall within the kids just walking in. Also follow up with the office so they know you're coming, and that the place where you're going to actually play is secured. I don't know how many times we have had to move the PE class outside because they didn't know we were coming. So those are some of the things I've learned the hard way. Just not following up before we go there to make sure that everything is all set and ready to go.
Yeah.
I learned that
great
the hard
advice.
way.
Yep. I've seen that too. Yeah. So true. I'll share one that I think back to my time. I used to do a lot of recruiting, and I'd go back and tell myself to have those hard conversations with teachers up front about, listen, if I'm going to spend 4 days out in the schools with you, helping you recruit, let's talk about how we can get the rentals into your students' hands from our store. Make sure this is mutually beneficial for both the store and the teacher. I'd do a lot of recruiting and then watch all those kids go rent from somewhere else because I didn't have that difficult conversation, or just kept being upfront with the teacher. From the very get-go, I would just say yes to everything. Every time someone would ask, hey, want to help me recruit? Sure, let's go. And didn't always work out for the business. But, made the world a better place. I like to think that. What do you say, Michelle?
I would say all of the above. And I totally understand where you're coming from, Shane, when it comes to that conversation. A lot of teachers are not business people, so they don't understand business. And it's our job as ed reps to let them know that, yes, we want to partner with you, but it is taking time and energy and expense from our company, and that there has to be a return on that, or we can't be here. And then you don't have the help getting your students recruited. So communication is very key, planning and making sure that everybody's in the know, because when other people get asked questions, they don't like to be caught off guard. And so if everybody knows what's going on, from the administration all the way down to the classroom teacher, then there's not any confusion, because confusion causes chaos and nothing positive happens out of chaos. So the key is communication and planning.
Yeah. Sounds like you're excellent at that. Very organized. Well, all of you, I cannot thank you enough for your time and your answers and sharing what you do. I think it's really useful for everyone out there, whether they've been recruiting for a long time themselves or they're just kind of thinking about this idea of getting out there. So thank you all. I very much appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Shane.
Thank you so much.
We hope you found the information in this episode useful and something you can use in your everyday life as an ed rep. If there is a topic you'd like to learn more about and have presented on a future episode of Ed Rep Radio, or you'd like to give us some feedback in general, please email us at edrepradio@eastmanstrings.com. To learn more about Eastman Music Company, go to our website, eastmanmusiccompany.com, or give your Eastman rep a call. Thanks, and drive safe.